who were the first people to figure out we're going to die?
Right.
And become aware of our own mortality in a way that, well, maybe I can conceive of being somewhere else. I don't actually die. So we know, elephants grieve and mammals grieve, and cetaceans, dolphins, whales, and so on, and chimps. They feel these mothers are just depressed and almost suicidal when their infants die. But that's different from, conceiving of like, well, I know I'm going to die because I see people around me going to die, but I conceive of maybe some other place to go. So I start off with something of a paradox that if I ask you to imagine yourself dead, you can't do it, because to imagine anything, you have to be alive. So it's not going to be like falling asleep and waking up the next morning because you have dreams or whatever. It's going to be more like general anesthesia, where it's 10, 9, 8, boom, boom, lights out, but you just never wake up. So, and we talk about things like, well, there's nothing after death, but even the word "no thing" implies there's a thing, or you're going to this place, there's nothing. Well, no thing. Or nowhere, it implies that there's a where that you're not going to, but there's not even a where that you're not going to. And it's like, with Lawrence Krauss and some of these cosmologists, what was there before the Big Bang? So when you say, well, imagine no universe, no stars or planets or galaxies, no light, but there's not even any space or time. And at some point, we don't have the words to even say what it is we're trying to talk about. There's nothing before the Big Bang. You can't even actually talk about it.
Well, don't they think now, though, that it's entirely possible that the Big Bang is like a cycle?
Yes, well, I think it's something like that. I think
expands and contracts infinitely forever.
Yeah, that's a preferable. Well, again, we have to come up with some way to talk about it. So
don't we also have this weird biological idea based on our own limitations that there's a birth and a death of everything?
Right. So I actually have a chapter devoted to Deepak Chopra and the Eastern wisdom traditions.
Friend.
We're kind of buddies now. And,
really?
Yeah. I went to his center down in Carlsbad and spent some time there. And
you think he's all right?
He's a good guy. Yeah. No, he's totally a good guy. I mean,
he's been, and at times in the past, either misleading or misled.
Yes, sometimes that's right. Some of his recommendations for dietary things or whatever, perhaps. But I know for sure, because I've gotten to know him pretty well, that he totally believes the stuff he says. It sounds like woo-woo, as I used to call it.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, if you interpret it from a kind of a Western Buddhist position, when he says, consciousness is the ground of all being, it's the ontological primitive, these things that sound nonsensical. But if you think about it, it's sort of from a simple perspective, the entire universe is in your brain, and when you cease to exist, the universe ceases to exist. For you. But you're in your brain. Okay, now I call that the weak consciousness principle. It's just sort of true by definition. Now he goes a little bit further and says, that consciousness is everything, and that we bring into existence material stuff by thinking about it or observing it or whatever. And here's some quantum physics experiments that are really spooky. It's like, okay, time out. Quantum physics is weird and spooky. Consciousness is weird and spooky. That doesn't mean they're connected. No, he thinks they are. So it's a debatable point. Okay, but still, the experience of going and so I did the meditation thing and all the massages and the teas and the food and all that stuff, and it's this beachside resort in Carlsbad. You can't help but feeling better. Like, yeah, this stuff works.
Where is Carlsbad?
It's down by Encinitas, north of San Diego.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a beautiful area.
Totally beautiful. Yeah, Deepak's not done, and he's got a good thing going. And not just Deepak. There's other people like Sam Harris. Bob Wright has a new book out called Why Buddhism is True. Okay, so it works. So we're back to, does it work? What do you mean by does it work? Not just for me. I had an experience and I felt better. We got to do better than that for science. So what Deepak and Bob Wright are talking about is that the Western version of Buddhism may actually work medically. It may, lower stress hormones in your body, lower blood pressure, these kinds of things that are measurable, because that's what we want to know from a Western scientific perspective, not just do I feel better, but 67% of the people who did this particular treatment, they got better by these measurable criteria. Okay, that seems fair enough to me. I'm open to that.
Now, this idea that there's nothing or no thing, that we can't even wrap our head around nothing, because we think of a thing, that there's no thing, but there's never a thing.
Right.
But how do we, or why don't we just say we don't know? Why don't we speculate on the possibility of consciousness being some sort of ethereal thing or something that exists outside of the body? But we don't know. We really don't know.
That's what
right?
I say. I conclude, and that I don't know if there's an afterlife or not. And at the very end of the book, we can come back to this later. I just say it doesn't really matter whether there's an afterlife or not, because we don't live in the afterlife. We live in this life. So this is the time you got to do whatever you got to do. I call this Alvey's error. Alvey is Alvey Singer, Woody Allen's character in Annie Hall. And remember the scene early in the movie where he has a flashback as a young boy, and he's in the psychiatrist's office with his mom, and what's the problem? He won't do his homework. You won't do your homework? Why won't you do your homework, Alvey? He says, the universe is expanding. He says, the universe is expanding. He goes, the universe is everything there is, and if it's expanding, one day it's all going to blow apart, so nothing really matters. I'm not going to do my homework. And his mother yells at him, what has the universe got to do with this? We live in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is not expanding. So that's my sort of take-home message there. We don't live in the afterlife,
right?
Or before the universe or after none of that matters. I mean, it's interesting to talk about, but we live in this life.
Yeah.
So this is what really counts.